She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star.
Good afternoon and welcome back. Headline from the Washington Post. The U.S. welcomed Indian students. Under Trump, they fear for their future. U.S. colleges host more than 300,000 students from India. As the Trump administration targets foreign students for deportation, many are rethinking their plans. Times of Israel reports Trump administration urges court to prevent release of anti-Israel students facing deportation. The administration urges a U.S. appeals court to allow immigration authorities to continue to detain anti-Israel students at Tufts University in Columbia who were arrested after engaging in pro-Palestinian advocacy on campus. How a Trump administration crackdown on foreign students has unraveled. What's really going on here? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they occur in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze the events that are impacting the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is it took more than 100 lawsuits and 50 restraining orders from dozens of federal judges, but after 20 days of court losses, the Trump administration has capitulated, reversing a decision that threatened the legal status of thousands of foreign students in the U.S., terminating university students' immigration records from a federal database. This would have certainly jeopardized their legal authorization to be in the country, but courts held it was illegal. What is going on here? Why is the administration still hell-bent on doing this to students? My guest is an international education specialist with over 2 decades of experience supporting international students. In his role as coordinator of international student services at Baltimore City Community College, he is William N. Hug. William, welcome back. Uh-oh, we might have a problem here. Let me see. I got to click this. Will, welcome back.
Thank you, sir.
There we go.
Dr. Leon.
All right. Thank you, as always. So, first question. You were first on just a few weeks ago. Tell me how your students are experiencing these radical changes in immigration.
Thank you for the question. I believe that there's a general fear out there. That is obviously the point. A lot of us who've been following this administration know that they thrive on fear. The students are definitely feeling it. Now, they don't always explain it to me, but students who are in any kind of travel mode, they want to travel home, they might ask, is this safe? Or they might make changes in their plans. We have students who are, if there's one problem in their life, they know it gets exacerbated. And so I had a couple of students who are fighting for some sort of immigration benefit or getting back to status. and they're extremely nervous. So it just heightens the fear, the natural fear that anyone has, to be in trouble with U.S. immigration. That's always something that's scary. ICE has been around and INS before that for decades. So, there are stories within the immigrant community and non-immigrant community that you don't want to get on the wrong side of things. But it just gets that much worse when people see the arbitrary and capricious nature of these enforcements of people being deported who are citizens or have done nothing wrong. So people are scared.
We are hearing the stories as they relate to Columbia University, Tufts University, major educational institutions in the country. Very little spotlight on the community that you service at the community college or the junior college level, which I don't think it would take too much imagination to figure, because of, again, the community that you serve, whether it's an economic issue, there are all kinds of other issues that your students are dealing with in the cycle through which they're gaining their education that isn't getting the spotlight shown upon it.
Thank you for putting that in context. Yes. So most community colleges are not residential colleges. So that's something that, I want viewers to know, audience to know. So a community college, is historically built in the anywhere from the 40s to 70s to meet the local needs, and they have expanded in mission and size. So a lot of our community colleges become great destinations for students who are on a student visa because they're coming temporarily. It costs a lot less, maybe 1/5 to 1/3 of what it would cost at a private or public four-year institution. So students will often get a great solid footing. There are also lots of support systems here at a community college. So we go from our culture, which is very, very supportive. That's what we specialize in. All the support services you could imagine, affordability, flexibility. We go from that. You place on top of that this fear. It's like an antithesis to why we got into this career and why our students are here.
I would also think, and this is just my assumption because I have not really looked into this into that level, to a great level of detail. But when you look at students that are attending four-year institutions, many of those international students, I just in the open was talking about 300,000 students from India that are in this country. Many of them are coming here to study, whereas I would think a lot of the students that are in your community, many of them are here. They came with their parents. They came here through a lot of other channels and are seeing the community college avenue as a way to get a quality education. So the reason they're in the country is different. Therefore, you may be very well drawing upon a whole different element of immigrant, if that makes sense.
Yes, that's very true. Some of the top sending countries are China, India, Korea, and yet at our community college, often at a community college, you represent the diversity of the immigrant community around, because people find out through word of mouth about community colleges. And so we are getting like half of our students are from the continent of Africa. So, and of African students, Nigeria is like the number one. And remember, those students are not unfamiliar with what this president has said about Nigeria in particular. There's this antithesis against any African heritage at all, as you know. I can't even start talking about all the things that I think about that. So these attacks on international students, I mean, they're from the very first week of an executive order. He mentioned F1 students. F1 is the visa for international students at most of these colleges. So you look at these countries where they're represented in this local area in the immigrant communities, and therefore we have more students from these countries. It doesn't help the tenor on campus when people feel under attack.
the Jamon asked, what are the push factors for education in America for these students?
Oh, that's a great question. In fact, it's part of the visa interview. You have to explain, well, why can't you just stay in your own country and learn, or why can't you go to another English-speaking country if that's what the appeal is? So community colleges are a great value. That you're getting pretty much the same, if not better, academic credentials, particularly for the first and preparation for the first 2 years of your academic career, and then you get to prove yourself. So you think about all the hurdles people have to go to jump over to get into a 4-year college, the SATs and the essays and the counselor. With the community college, we're open doors. We're open admission, most of us. So that means a student can come here and prove themselves academically with all the support systems and the flexibility that's available at a community college, and then earn a transfer scholarship to a 4-year college. So in fact, I think for a long time, we had many students from all over the world transferring from our college to Morgan because of the great, generous honors program there. I don't think it's open to international students anymore, but they do have other transfer opportunities in other colleges in the area like Towson and UMBC, Coppin. They all have great transfer programs, UB.
And I'm at Morgan now. And,
I thought so.
And phenomenal students. But in my earlier question, I was thinking, when talking about immigrant students at community colleges, I was thinking about the dreamers, for example, thinking about students, or thinking about kids that came here with their parents, whether they be Chinese, whether they be from Latin America. The parents are undocumented. The kids have grown up undocumented, but still are chasing the American dream. And for them, education is their avenue. Those are some of the scenarios that I was thinking about at the community college level, as opposed to Chinese students coming here pursuing a PhD in whatever they're pursuing. That was the kind of distinction I was trying to draw with the earlier question that I asked.
Okay. Yeah. So my primary responsibility is working with international students. I'm what's called a PDSO, primary designated school official. So I'm the main person in working with international students on F1 visa. But because I have an affinity to immigration issues and multicultural diversity issues, a lot of students who would be on a different type of visa, whether undocumented or dreamers, DACA, the population you're talking about, will still come through and talk to me, or end up talking to me at some point. So I'm very familiar with how the DREAM Act happened in Maryland. It happened as when the federal DREAM Act failed, Maryland, some people in Maryland were open to it. And in fact, the one particular organization, CASA, I have to always give them credit. Particularly the youth in CASA were so instrumental. And a lot of those youth leaders ended up coming through BCCC. So in fact, there's one particular, I mentioned this last time, one of my favorite leaders, local leaders, is a former student here. And I don't remember her status, but there were a lot of folks involved in that program who were undocumented and have since become permanent residents, U.S. citizens. Dreamers, as we call them, are, as you said, given that extra boost statewide, with the idea that this is a young person who is undocumented, but not through a choice of their own. They were brought by their parents as a minor, or traveled unaccompanied as a minor. And so if their family has put in roots and paid taxes, they have to prove they've paid taxes, that they should be able to go to college at the in-state rate, not the out-of-state rate. And in fact, many of the students don't even realize they're undocumented until it comes time to apply to college, which is heartbreaking. So I love the fact that there are these support systems like the DREAM Act. We were the first college to put up on our website how to apply, and CASA came by, and their legal team was like, well, and they actually were appreciative of that. So there are support systems like that in community colleges, sometimes at the four-year colleges. And some four-year colleges actually have scholarships specifically for Dreamers or DACA recipients. DACA meaning Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and that's the federal designation for someone like we're talking about who came as a minor.
In fact, just to put a final point on that, I don't know what the data says, but I know that there are a number of kids that, to your point, don't find out their status until they have to apply for college. And then their parents are forced to tell them, we got a problem here because when you fill out this form, blah, 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 blah. So that is a large population that a lot of people probably aren't aware of. We didn't talk about this much the first time, but specifically talk about the international, which you have done, but elaborate a little bit more on the students, the international students in Baltimore and what we know here as the DMV, the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia.
Well, it's been a growing population. COVID hit us like it hit a lot of people because federal regulations would not allow students to come from overseas to the U.S. on a student visa. So we only had students who were transferring for a while, and then instead of having hundreds of students on student visa here, we were down to under 50. I talked to a colleague in Baltimore County. They also have experienced a huge growth, and all of us in the field nationally have been comparing notes that we're worried with these very anti-immigrant and pro-enforcement bent of all immigration and Department of State agencies, that it's going to make students again choose other countries and choose other areas. But Maryland has been very, very supportive. Our governor and the state's attorney have been very supportive of international students, Dreamers, DACA, every type of student who's not a U.S. Citizen. In addition to, of course, the traditional support, the high support for education, higher education in Maryland for all students and underrepresented students or students who've been left behind based on decades of neglect and racism and sexism and all that. So I feel like with international, people were just starting to expand the idea of diversity, multiculturalism, to include students who are foreign born, who have different visa status. Some are on the student visa, like my primary students I work with, and some are on other types of status, asylee, refugee, pending asylum, victims of violence, human trafficking, everything. People have all kinds of different mixed immigration status even within the same family. So I just want to make sure people know when we say international, there are two definitions. It's the broad definition of anyone who's not a U.S. citizen or foreign born, is the way I look at it. And then the narrower population, which is the F1 student visa population, which is that particular population is growing very high, very fast.
Cherie says, thank you, Will Hug, for all your contributions. You just mentioned students choosing other countries. Explain to the audience why that matters, because there, I'm sure, would be some watching this who would say, why should I care if a Chinese student decides to go to Uganda instead of coming to Baltimore? What difference does it make? Good for them.
Right. And I really appreciated our last conversation where we got into, I think you and I share a lot of the same perspectives on diversity, social justice, multicultural education. So I won't get into why I'm propelled, to make this happen and have cross-cultural experiences available to not just the domestic students, but the international students. But if you would just look at it from purely a financial benefit and general economy. So we know that states will, and the federal government have promoted exports to bring in money from the rest of the world to the U.S., to the state of Maryland, to Baltimore, right? And how do they do that? They sell things, they open up markets. What people don't think about is that international education is an export, because that means somebody's coming from overseas, their money is coming from overseas, and it's not just for tuition, it's for everything else that a student pays for. You look at the commercials, these days, it's like, oh, outfit your dorm room and help open up a bank account and help them get a new phone. Well, all of those services are needed by international students as well. So for Maryland, I think it's one of the top six export sources of revenue for exports is international education. We have such a strong higher education community in Maryland. It's really one of the best in the country, even for our small size. And then you look at the nation, it's also in the top 10, if not top 6, of exports for the whole nation. And when you're talking, that's up there. In fact, I think somebody said it was more than, it's more than coal and natural gas combined. International education is a bigger, comprises a bigger section of the export revenue than our exports of coal and natural gas. So we're talking lots of money.
Well, and again, as I said in the open, the open was just referencing 300,000 students just from India, and they tend to pay full tuition.
Mm.
So tuition at Tufts, tuition at Columbia, you're talking $80,000-$90,000 a year.
Right.
And it's in a number of institutions, they're those foreign students paying full tuition, and that includes room and board and all the other sundry things that go with it. They're then underwriting for the scholarships and reductions in tuition that American students are afforded.
Yes, it's not just that they're paying full pay, because there are very few scholarships for international students, so most are full pay. But there's also the issue of the contribution for the economy. So you have STEM fields, you have the arts, you have humanities, you have teachers, you have nurses. You think about all the nurses. I've seen so many nurses and other healthcare professionals. I had one student who was from India who was on the front lines because she was a respiratory care therapist. And she was so dedicated. She's such a wonderful person, and really gave back to Baltimore and was downtown right at the center of the crisis. So there are people who are bringing their talents. You look at some of the tech giants like Google, Yahoo, Facebook. A lot of them employ former F1 visa students or H1B students or J students. These are foreign workers who come here and bring their talents and work with other domestic folks to attack a problem or to create something in a way that's a brand new way. And that's what we know. We talked about this last time. That's what we know about multicultural education and global cooperation, is that the more perspective you put on a problem, people from different perspectives and upbringing, the richer often the reward, whatever you're trying to work on, whether it's a commercial enterprise or an arts enterprise or any type of organization.
This issue is a lot more complex, and folks really want to give it credit. So talk about your experience with a number of these undocumented students and what you know about their experiences with the changes that have been implemented by this new administration.
Well, working with undocumented students, again, it's maybe less than 5% of what I do. But when I do work with undocumented students, there's a lot of family decision making. A lot of students come from mixed families with mixed visa status. So it's kind of heartbreaking, when you see it, because you know that there's a struggle even internally in the family. And then this kind of environment just exacerbates those differences and makes so many of these families vulnerable. Not just the individual student, but the whole family is vulnerable. And also very strong and resilient in fighting these things. And I'm very proud to know lots of very strong leaders who come from an undocumented background or families where they're undocumented members. But getting a student to open up to someone like me, and I know I work with international students, and I have to report to ICE, every day about, not every day, but constantly about our international students if they're maintaining the law. There's that fear of talking to me. And sometimes just the way I look or the way I talk, they're not sure about my politics and whether they're safe. So there's a whole layer of trust building that you have to facilitate. We have to create that space of trust. I've learned to, like some of my colleagues who've worked more directly with undocumented students, they have the practice of bringing the family, because it's almost always the family, bringing the family into an office and closing the door and showing, okay, what you have to share it stays right here. It's private. We're open we're open admissions. So anybody's welcome to be here. The struggle for us is making sure that they're getting the right education. If there's a language issue, making sure we deal with creating a strong foundation of English language as one of the languages that they speak, and appreciation for the bilingual, trilingual heritage that they have. That's very important. And also to make sure the money is there, so that Maryland has some good support systems, like the MISFA, and other programs. And each college can have its own support system as well if it chooses. We have something called the Mayor's Scholars Program, where students from anywhere in Maryland can come here basically for free for 2 years, and then they can transfer to Coppin to finish their BA for free. So we're really excited when undocumented students can take part in that, because for a lot of students, they didn't even know how they were going to pay for college.
In the open, I referenced, in fact, let me just read this again. In the open, I was talking about it's taken more than 100 lawsuits, 50 restraining orders from dozens of federal judges. But after 20 days of court losses, the Trump administration finds itself losing ground. What have been some of the most dramatic changes in the way that all of this activity has impacted you all just in the last 100 days of this second Trump administration?
Well, I have to bring up the case of Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia. If you go to the CASA website, you can find out more information about the attempts to bring him back to the U.S. As many people know, he was one of the first group of hundreds of U.S. residents who were basically kidnapped and taken to this high this detention center in El Salvador with documented human rights abuses. And it turned out he had specifically been protected by an immigration judge saying this gentleman should not be deported. And then, of course, the Supreme Court said 9-0 that the administration should bring him back. The administration, somebody spilled the beans and admitted that they made an administrative error, but they refused to bring him back, and they joke about it on the right that they're not bringing him back. I bring that case up because not only is he from Maryland, but ostensibly he was doing what he was supposed to be doing in immigration court and doing everything he was supposed to be doing. Yes, he had some complicated personal history, but the whole point is he was not afforded due process, which is a constitutional right. And a lot of people have made the leap that if this can happen to somebody who has rights and the Supreme Court has supported, then none of us are safe. Well,
I'm
that
one of
should
those
scare
people.
everyone.
I'm
But-
one of those people that, in fact, I made that case as soon as I heard about the story. I said, folks, don't get this confused. This has nothing to do with immigrants. This is a trial balloon that the administration is using to see how far they can push the due process argument, because we're the ultimate targets here, not immigrants.
Mhm. Yeah, we heard the comment from Trump when he was hosting the president of El Salvador, and he said, "We're looking to deport homegrown problem people." You know, what I mean?
Right.
Everybody read between the lines. I mean, anybody who's paying attention to the history of the criminal justice system in the U.S. and slavery and slave patrols and the convict lease system, and I mean, we're talking about hundreds of years of abuse. Um, Communities that already know about this history saw this connection. And then those of us who have been paying attention, not from these communities, but been paying attention and trying to be allies and advocates, also paid attention and said, okay, this is and of course, anybody, who really wants to follow it, they could look at the ACLU. They are doing some really good work on that. A lot of lawyers have been filing temporary restraining orders, and judges have been granting temporary restraining orders. In fact, when I went online, to get back to your question about the changes in immigration, one of the things that happened was specifically for international students is, hundreds of international students were told, "Oh, your visa has been revoked." And only an immigration judge is supposed to say a visa is revoked. They were saying the Department of State could, and it's a legal limbo, really, this whole argument. If a visa could be revoked while you're still here, the visa is what you get to come to the U.S. legally. Saying, "Oh, okay, well, now we don't like you because you have some kind of connection to the criminal justice system." I compared notes with colleagues around the country because I was caught off guard. A lot of us were, and we realized our students were being their visas were being revoked because at some sort of criminal justice passed. They didn't say what it was. They didn't send a notice to, this is the U.S. government, did not send a notice to the students, did not send a notice to the schools. There's a report that you can choose to go in, and we started going in daily to see if anybody was quote unquote terminated. And if you go there and you look at it, people did screenshots. If you look at these notices, they're very obscure. The language is obscure and it's very hard to understand. And all of a sudden, because of these temporary restraining orders by these awarded by the judges and brought because of these cases filed by hundreds of lawyers, the administration had to backtrack. And all of a sudden, the students' records in the immigration system, the ICE system called SEVAs, just reverted back to normal with no explanation. And so when students ask me about that, if I know that that's happened to them, I said, you should go get a lawyer, get a copy of your whatever criminal justice thing that was, whether somebody, a judge, like in one case, I know a student said that their case went to a judge and the judge dismissed the charges. But that same student was, of course, supposed to be deported because of this case that a judge had dismissed. So I said, well, if in cases like that, a student probably should get all of the copies of their criminal justice expungement or whatever the case was, get back in touch with that criminal lawyer, get in touch with an immigration lawyer. That's expensive. That adds extra fear, it adds extra time. And that is the point. This whole, it's not just can we deport as many people as possible, but I believe the intention is to stoke as much fear as possible. And I've seen a lot of smarter people than me make that same case. This is all about invoking fear. And I'm not trying to invoke fear. I'm just trying to be realistic.
In terms of that tactic, what do you see as the potential impact of these changes on the wider society?
Right. So, as you said, this is a balloon sent up, a trial balloon sent up to see who's going to fight. Are we going to fight on behalf of immigrants, undocumented immigrants, criminals? Often, we've already found that a lot of these immigrants who were deported didn't have a substantial number, had no criminal history whatsoever. That should alarm anyone. The 9-0 ruling by the Supreme Court that the administration is refusing to comply with, that's a constitutional crisis. We're in a constitutional crisis. There are many, many observers of the U.S. political system, scholars who've been writing about this for decades, have said this is the worst they've seen as a constitutional crisis. I'm not saying that this is a perfect democracy. I'll be the last person to say that. I always say that democracy is a work in progress, and we haven't gotten there yet. Kind of like basically what Dr. King said. It's a great experiment, and I hope we can get there. But we all need to band together. And I'm saying this because I post a lot about this on my own social media, and I get very few people who respond. And yet when I run into them, like, oh yeah, keep posting that stuff. And it's like, I'm not posting things to post things. I'm posting things so that it spreads and this conversation turns into action, that all of us need to be on alert and share what we know and share different perspectives about what it is. For example, I think this anti-immigrant fervor would not be anti-immigrant at all if we were talking about folks from Scandinavia and England and Canada rushing the border. I don't think it would be. At one point, Trump said in the first presidency that, why can't we get more folks from Scandinavia?
Right.
And the answer was because they got it pretty good. They're not coming here.
Well,
but,
and to that point, they're here. And they're overstaying their visas.
Good point. Yeah.
But they come another way. They are what's the term for the women that come and take care of people's kids? Au pairs.
Au pairs. That's right.
They're au pairs from Ireland. They're
Russia.
Au pairs from Scotland.
Yes.
And they come here on a visa. The visa expires, and they don't go back home.
Right.
So they're not coming through Texas and across the tunneling under the Great Wall that Donald Trump built. No, they're flying into JFK.
The most famous would be the Musk brothers. Elon Musk and his brother admitted it.
Right, exactly. And Peter Thiel, he's another one.
Yeah.
You just mentioned that Trump wanted to see what the pushback would be. Mm. And when you said that, that made me think about the Abrego Garcia case. And I was watching a town hall in Iowa. Senator Chuck Grassley was hosting a town hall, and I was shocked to hear a white guy from Iowa at a Chuck Grassley town hall yell at Chuck Grassley, "What are you doing about that guy from Maryland, that Abrego guy from Maryland? What are you doing about that, Chuck?" He said, "Do your job." I was saying, my God, Mike Johnson was not expecting that to come even though Mike Johnson is in the House, not the Senate. He wasn't expecting that to come at Chuck Grassley. Chuck Grassley wasn't expecting that to come at Chuck Grassley.
Yeah, that made me really proud. And I see some hope.
I'm sorry, Robert Brown. Thank you for that super sticker. Go ahead, Bill.
No, I just wanted to say it made me really proud that gentleman did that, and I do see some hope in the mass protests. I remind international students on F1 visa, be very careful what you post on social media. Don't go to these protests. You can support other ways quietly if you want to, but there is something in the student visa regulations that say you can't be involved in protests. And we saw what happened with the protesters, who were fighting for, humane treatment, anti-genocide in Gaza, that they were targeted, and there's actually new regulations about this too, that they're going to start scraping students on student visa, their social media to look for, I think they called it anti-Semitic anti-Semitism and other anti-Americanism. I think that was the phrase. I think, well, anti-Americanism that's way too subjective,
Right.
and we have freedom of speech in this country for a reason, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But
AZ, no, yeah. Wait a minute. Want to make? He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Nick. Midwest folks are some of the best folks." I don't debate that with you, Dr. Nick, at all. But if we understand the stereotypes, and you're talking Iowa, Chuck Grassley Town Hall, you're not expecting pro-immigrant dialogue at a red state Chuck Grassley Town Hall meeting. That's not going to be the common theme that one would expect. That that was the point.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So about Iowa.
Wait a minute, before you do, folks, welcome to the Will Hug Show. And
No, I'm just really interested in your, because I know you have this political savvy and all these decades of expertise. And when you say the comment about Iowa, I'm thinking about how Jesse Jackson did there and Obama, and how you could put that political history together with what you just said.
Well, because if I understand your question, and again, I was speaking to stereotypes. And there's the great book by his last name is Frank, called "What's the Matter with Kansas," and which was written about the change in the political dynamic during the Reagan administration, and how people in the Midwest were convinced that the downturn in their plights was attributable to immigration and other non-white people that were having a negative impact on the American dream, on pretty much white people's ability to achieve the American dream. And then you take that basis, now you bring Donald Trump into the mix. And so now we're looking at exponential elements here, again, immigrants and all. So Reverend Jackson did quite well in the Midwest, Barack Obama, but that narrative has shifted, and it has shifted back towards what's the matter with Kansas, what is happening to the political mindset and the narrative that is impacting the thinking of many in the Midwest. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. I understand better.
Okay. And I appreciate your question. In fact, Shannon says, great book about culture wars. It is. Thomas Frank is his name. Thomas Frank, and the book is called "What's the Matter with Kansas?" And it was a very, very, very good book. That, in fact, if you remember, when Senator Barack Obama was running and he got videotaped at a fundraiser in San Francisco, and he said, it's people in the Midwest, people that listen to Fox News and to Lou Dobbs, he said, that are turning to their xenophobia, they're turning to their guns, they're turning to their God. And he was talking about the shift in political mindset. And when he got caught on tape saying that infuriated a lot of folks in the Midwest, and it made Lou Dobbs really angry. And I know that because I did the Lou Dobbs show the night after that happened, and Lou was spitting nails. He was so angry. But Barack Obama was right. So in your opinion, what have there been victories in stopping the administration from implementing their plans?
And thank you for the question and the explanations. I think the temporary restraining orders that the judges have granted, that the lawyers have filed, have been victories. I think Harvard and led the way in rejecting some of the administration's overreach and basically saying we're going to come in and look at your curricula and what you're teaching and who you're admitting. And they said, no, you're not. And then other colleges and universities, I believe, found their spine and joined that. The solidarity movements between the different movements, people have been, I feel, more willing to join demonstrations. I just happened to be down at the National Museum of African American History and Culture and didn't realize it was a protest right there at the Washington Monument, for those of you who know that area, right next door to each other, right across the street. And I was, really encouraged by people of all backgrounds, coming together to fight this. I think people are realizing it's a constitutional crisis and people are being creative. But I am concerned. I feel like our students are very vulnerable. There's a conference coming up for our profession at the end of the month. I'm interested to see, just talk to people, what are you doing and how are you supporting? There's some online groups of support that we share notes. What are some practical things we can do to help protect our students and warn our students? But if they want to do what they tried to do a month ago or a couple weeks ago, where they just revoked people's visas, I don't know what we're going to do. And there are these lists of countries that they don't want to issue visas to it in the future. So what's a positive what's a positive balance for that would be shows like yours and others, where we're getting the word out that all of these issues are connected. They're going after immigrants because it's the easiest group to scapegoat, because most people are in the U.S. or U.S. citizens. So that's a minority, but there are a lot of minorities. So they can just start picking people off, and they have, a lot of people have looked at the legislation that's been proposed and the executive orders. A lot of them have been stopped. A lot of these have been stopped by the court system, but other things have gone through that, make us puzzled. I think it was Justice Ketanji Brown just issued a statement about, going after federal judges, and that was kind of unusual, I believe, for a Supreme Court justice, sitting Supreme Court justice, to issue basically a slap on the wrist, slap on the back of the hand. Like, you can't do this. You can't go after federal judges. We are at the head of this equal branch of government, and we're not going to stand for it. There are only 9 of us, but we have a lot of power. And she's right. They do have a lot of power. I hope they exercise it judiciously.
And you just talked about people getting involved. In fact, I'd love to get you back after that conference to get your assessment of what's the broader perspective from your colleagues. And you complimented me on shows like this, but shows like this are only what they are because of guests like yourself. So otherwise, I would just be sitting here talking to myself, and which most folks probably would not find to be that informative. So as we wrap up, because I know you got a hard stop, and I want to get you out a little early. People getting involved. I think members of the administration are really surprised at the national response to this action. I think they really thought that they might be able to slide this one in under the radar, but they're finding out that is nowhere near the case. What is it whether it be Maryland, Virginia. A lot of folks don't know, and this is an example that I use all the time. A lot of folks don't know. I'm sure you remember this a couple years ago. In fact, it was the first Trump administration. The price of crab meat went through the roof. The price per pound of crab meat went through the roof because in the Maryland, Virginia area, to a great degree, crab picking is done by Latinos. And when they got concerned about an attack on their status, a lot of them either went home, went underground. So finding people to pick crab meat became a real challenge. Price of crab meat went through the roof. I mean, so that's a direct correlation.
Yeah.
Between
I really want to talk about that.
Huh?
I want to talk about the crab meat.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So as anybody who's not tuned in from Maryland may not realize like how big crab meat is to our economy and our whole culture. Like people, it was a crisis here in Baltimore and in Maryland because we just, it's part of our culture. The Old Bay seasoning was created to put on crabs, and that's gone worldwide. So what happened with the crab pickers is not just folks who were scared about immigration. It was also seasonal workers, and I'm blanking. It's either H1, H2B. I think it's H2B. They were seasonal workers who come for a particular thing. And the ironic thing about Trump getting rid of all these H2Bs, these seasonal workers who specialize in different crops, like crab picking here, but could be other crops elsewhere, blueberries or strawberries, is that he himself used. He saved a lot of money by employing H2B visa holders at his resorts. So it's completely ironic and tone deaf, and I don't know, you have better adjectives than I do, but it was just how do we see beyond this? It's helping people see the economic piece and how to see all these issues are connected, and like a lot of people on the progressive left have said, and even some on the center left have said, we've got to find a way to build coalitions in a way that we haven't done before. And it's also a great time to reimagine what do we want for democracy. And if we're not going to be anti-racist, anti-sexist, pro-religious diversity, pro-LGBTQ, if we're not going to be pro all of these things, then we're going to be picked apart, literally. They're just going to pick us off one movement at a time. And so this is a time to say, no, we're all in this together. And we, our cousins and other people in other parts of the world, in the country, who might be pro-Constitution will speak up. He's attacking your Constitution. You may not be on the left side of the political spectrum, but you don't want the Constitution to be injured, do you?
That's a great way to end the conversation. And again, Will, I know you've got a hard stop and I want to get you out a little early, but let me also say, man, I'm really digging that blue on blue, the tie on the shirt, especially since we had the Met Gala last night. No, I really dig that combination, man. And with a navy blue jacket, I like that, Will.
Sir. Thank you, sir.
So folks,
it's from Ghana. You can go to
BMA. You can go to Will Hug online and get some more fashion tips. But no, I'm really digging that combination, man. I like that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Hey, I appreciate your time. Again, got you out on time. Look forward to having you back.
Thank you, Professor. Okay.
Thanks, Lou. Lou, I'm looking at this note. Thank you, Will Hug, not Lou. Thank you, Will Hug. I'm looking at this note about Lou Dobbs. So thank you. So the Jamon, you just said Lou Dobbs tonight with an exclamation point. If you want to clarify, please do. And so, hey, folks, paying very close attention to this issue is very important, because this is real pushback by the judiciary. And I think a lot of people, first of all, weren't expecting this type of pushback from the judiciary. A lot of people were thinking that because in many districts that the Trump administration has stacked the court, they stacked the Supreme Court. A lot of people were expecting that they would just rubber stamp a lot of these executive orders and a lot of these proclamations by the president. And what you're finding out is the court is pushing back. They are, in fact, defending the Constitution. One of the silliest things, and I've heard Donald Trump say a lot of silly things, but one of the silliest things I heard him say was Sunday when he was talking to Kirsten Welker when she asked him about the Constitution, and his question was, I don't know if I'm supposed to defend that or not. You swore an oath to defend the Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic, and now you don't know whether you're supposed to defend the Constitution? Mr. President, yeah, you are. That's your job. That's your primary job. In case no one in your cabinet or in your junior high school history class explained that to you. And yes, Zhao Yun, crab meat salad isn't pretty good. Crab meat salad is very good, in case you were wondering. And look at what is happening to the American farmer and tariffs. Absolutely. American farmers getting crushed. I think we talked about this yesterday. The American farmer, and the soybean farmer is a perfect example of this. They're getting hammered because China is no longer buying American soybeans. They're now sourcing them from Brazil. And I think it'll be a long, hard, cold time before China just flips the switch back to buying American soybeans. Those relationships, because they are relationships, don't work that way. Let me see what we got here. O.L. Griffin. Lou Dobbs is an American political and financial talk program that was hosted by Lou Dobbs. A program initially aired on CNN. That is true. And it's no longer on because Lou Dobbs is dead. But I was a regular on Lou Dobbs Tonight back in the day. Do you want my rundown with him? Wait a minute. Cherie, Lou Dobbs, do you want my rundown with him? No. I mean, you can send it to me, Cherie. Cherie, I'm interested in anything you have to say. So, of course, I would want to know your rundown with him. Let me just quickly give you mine. Lou Dobbs was always a conservative. And when he came on CNN initially, he was a conservative. And I respected him for that. I watched him every night because even though he was a conservative, I felt he was fairly honest in his analysis. But what happened, in my humble opinion, is he started reading and believing his own press clippings. And he started to get a little beside himself. So much so that CNN had to fire him. Because at that point, this is how I saw the networks seeing themselves at that time. Fox, of course, was hard right. MSNBC was on the left. And I saw CNN as seeing themselves as being in the middle. And they tried their best, and they were successful, I believe, for a very long time at presenting a fairly good, moderate presentation of the issues. I think that has since changed, and Lou, I think, did a fairly good job of doing that. And but again, when we got to the Obama campaign, Lou lost his mind. And I remember being in the green room the day that whole Obama story broke out of San Francisco. and Lou came in screaming and yelling and spitting nails. And I told him, because he said, well, what do you think about that? And I said, well, Lou, I think Barack Obama is right. And when I said that, he yelled at me, "You're out of your mind." And I said, well, Lou, have you read Thomas Frank's book, What's the Matter with Kansas? I said, have you read Frantz Fanon? I said, Frantz Fanon wrote a lot about what happens in cultures when these types of things happen. I said, have you read any Frantz Fanon? And he looked at me like the RCA Victor dog. He kind of turned his head, the sound of your master's voice. He kind of turned his head like this and looked at me and started blinking. And then he just yelled, "You're out of your mind." And he went out of the green room. I thought that was kind of funny. Anyway, with all of that, I'm missing something here. Hang on a second, folks. Stay tuned. I'm missing something. Did you send me a text? Because I'm not seeing it. You called me here to call my attention to something, but I'm not seeing the text. So what am I missing? I'm speaking to my producer, who I think is trying to call my attention to something, but I can't see what it is. It's not showing up in the text stream. So what am I missing? Please forgive this. This is live radio, folks, or live streaming. So sometimes you gotta. What am I missing? Okay, so hey, folks, bear with me 1 second here. I don't see them. Oh, the email. Oh, because they're not showing up on the text. So okay. All right. So let me see here. Your link. Okay. So I'm not. Oh, wait a minute. Can we talk about? Oh no, that was from yesterday. All right. So let me see what we got here, folks. Again, please bear with me here. I'm not seeing those questions either. There we go. Okay, now I got it. Okay. So from the outside looking in, it feels like with every new proclamation or public stance Trump takes, it chips away at parts of the American economy or institutions. Given that, where do you think all those once vocal Trump supporters have gone? Are they rethinking their positions, or are they just quieter now? Well, I think it's a combination of the two. Because you're right, every new proclamation or public stance that Trump takes does chip away. It chips away at the American economy. It chips away at American institutions. It chips away at the American Constitution. But remember very clearly that what's his name? The Trump whisperer, Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon was very clear. That's exactly what it is they're intending to do. They're intending to chip away at institutions. They're intending to chip away at the Constitution because he told us they're here to deconstruct the administrative state. One of the problems that I see happening with Donald Trump over the next 6 to 8 months, he's messing with the money. And his benefactors are not happy with the downturn in the economy, with the downturn in the Dow and in the stock market. They weren't expecting him to mess with the money. Yes, Zhao Yun, the goal is authoritarianism. No question about that. But the ruling elite, they're okay with the move towards authoritarianism so long as it's still financially viable and feasible for them to manage or govern in that manner. But now that this is having the downturn and the impact on the economy, those folks aren't happy. Because as my dad said when he dropped me off my freshman year at Hampton, don't mess with my money. Don't mess up my money. If I have to come back out here to get you because you have failed out of school, he said, son, it's going to be the longest cross-country flight known to man. So everything's fine until they mess with the money. Dr. Data, why is Steve Bannon trying to deconstruct the administrative state? What's the ultimate motive for this? The ultimate motive for this is authoritarianism. The ultimate motive for this is neocolonialism. The ultimate motive for this is privatization of government functions so that the ruling elite can steal more money from the American piggy bank. An example I use for this would be the Easy Pass system. For those of you on the East Coast, I don't know what they have on the West Coast, but the Easy Pass system is an example of this, privatizing the collection of fares and tolls on American highways. Another example of this would be the joint ventures in terms of building roads in the United States, the joint ventures between the private sector and the public sector. So now what you have being integrated into the American transportation, the American highway system, you have private companies signing contracts with state governments to construct roads. And then their payback on this are the fees that they charge to traverse these roadways. And they're raising their fees, charging people more money. They have it written into their contracts that they are going to be able to recoup their investments over a certain amount of time by charging a certain rate for people to use those roads. And now what they want to do, we're seeing this play itself out in the Commonwealth of Virginia, in Northern Virginia. They're raising their fees, or trying to raise their fees, to exorbitant rates, charging people $20 a trip to go to and from work. So where to go? Who asked that question? Oh, so Larry Hooks. Those are examples of why they're trying to deconstruct the administrative state, so that they can build more private prisons, so that they can enhance the profitability of prison business, but that's not the term I'm looking for. The prison industrial complex, but that's still not the term I was looking for. So that your calling systems, your 800 numbers, customer service systems, many of them are run out of American prisons. When you call, in some instances, when you call to make airline reservations, for example, and you're giving your credit card information over the phone, you're talking to people that are incarcerated in this country, customer service numbers and whatnot. So these are some of the examples of how the deconstruction of the administrative state will open up the playground for the private sector to come in and provide even more of the services that we have been used to having the government perform, so that the private sector can make more money. All of this talk about school choice and charter schools. Charter schools are a scam. I'm going to say it again. Charter schools are a scam. They are a way, instead of investing the money into the private school, into the public school system, instead of properly funding public education so that everybody, no matter where you live in the country, If you want to get an education and go to a public school, you're guaranteed a quality public school education. Now they want to start all this charter school crap so that the private sector can access public school dollars and the private sector makes the money, while siphoning the better students from the public sector into the charter school. The charter school game is a scam. You don't need charter schools if you're properly funding and educating the children in your country. Oh, but Dr. Leon, we don't have the money to do that. Yes, you do. But you're buying F-16s. You're sending that money to Lockheed Martin. You're sending that money to Raytheon. You're sending that money to McDonnell Douglas. You're sending that money to Boeing so that they have the money for the F-35 fighter jet program that actually flies like they call it a flying piano, because the thing can't fly. You can't even fly the damn thing in the rain because the so-called top secret stealth coating that they put on the plane rusts or washes off when you fly it at night and when you fly it in the rain. Foolishness like that is what is actually decimating the public school funding in this country. And you don't think I'm right? What are budgets? What are budgets? Budgets are numeric representation of priority. So when you look at how much you're spending on your military, and then you compare how much you're spending to fund public schools, that tells you right there where your priorities lie. That's why I think it's Bill Calhoun, the former CEO of Boeing, was asked in July of 2020, I believe it was, who Boeing wanted to be president, Trump or Biden. Bill Calhoun, you can look this up, it's all in the papers, said, doesn't matter to Boeing, we're going to get paid anyway. And he was talking about the Boeing defense systems. Doesn't matter. We're going to get paid anyway. Doesn't matter. He said it doesn't matter who gets put in office because both the Republicans and the Democrats understand the value that Boeing brings to protecting the United States. And folks, we don't have to spend all this money to defend the United States if we were smart enough to start. Wait a minute. I'm confusing myself. We would not have to spend all of this money defending ourselves if we stopped starting these fights in the first place. If we stopped trying to pick a fight with China over Taiwan, we would not be concerned about China being a military adversary. If we did away, thank you, Multi-Tom-Tom, if we did away with these 800 or so military bases that are around the world, we could afford better public education. If we didn't use Ukraine as a proxy, as Lil Marco Rubio told us it was a proxy war, if we didn't use Ukraine as a proxy to try to bait Russia into a fight in Ukraine, we wouldn't need all those trillions of dollars that we wasted in this effort. We could have the best public school programs in the world. But we choose to fund war, to fund jingoism, to fund conflict instead of educating our children. We wouldn't need these Chinese and Indian engineers. We would have them, as Donald Trump talks about, our homegrown. We would have them homegrown. We wouldn't need to bring them in on H-1B visas. Do you think Trump is even concerned about how much visible support he still has? Oh, let me go back to the question about, are they rethinking their positions? talking about the folks that all these vocal Trump supporters. Let me say to you, in answering that question, the MAGA people, the true MAGA people, I don't think that those folks are changing their position. Those true MAGA people, for all intents and purposes, are ignorant white supremacists. And that's what Donald Trump, when he told you he loves the uneducated, that's not me playing into stereotypes. I'm listening to what Donald Trump said. Donald Trump told us he likes the uneducated. Who was he talking? I think he said he loves the uneducated. Who was he talking about? He was talking about those ignorant ass MAGA people. That's who he was talking about. That's who he loves. That's his base. That's his base. The people that he's losing are a lot of those Republicans and a lot of those conservatives that were on the periphery. So now as you look at his numbers going into the tank, as you look at his numbers on the decline, going into the toilet, it's not because he's losing his base, because those white supremacists will always be white supremacists, and they will love Donald Trump to their dying day. Those idiots with the MAGA hats on and all that kind of foolishness, those folks aren't going anywhere. It's the folks on the periphery. It's the folks on the fringes. It's the folks who are now showing up at the town hall meetings, showing up at the Chuck Grassley town hall meeting in Ohio saying, I did not vote for this. This is not what I voted for. Cutting my VA benefits, cutting my access to Social Security by closing the local Social Security offices, cutting my daughter's job who was 2 days away from her completing her probationary period. I didn't vote for that. Au contraire, you did vote for that. What you're actually saying, and I'm repeating myself, but I'm answering the question. What you are truly saying is you weren't supposed to screw me in the process. That soy farmer who voted for Donald Trump, who didn't learn his or her lesson when Donald Trump screwed with NAFTA and made NAFTA worse, that was the first shot at the soy farmer. They didn't learn their lesson. But part of the reason why they didn't learn their lesson was because the Democrats have offered them nothing to compare the Donald Trump rhetoric to. The Democrats as a party have not offered the American people any substantive legislation to offset the garbage that Mike Johnson and the other Republicans are trying to shove down people's throats. So Hakeem Jeffries, you gave them nothing. Kamala Harris, you gave them nothing. And all AOC, you're giving them nothing. So they can't learn the lesson because you're not teaching them anything to compare it to. Bernie Sanders did come out and offer a great plan to salvage Social Security, but the party has not rallied around that piece of legislation, or the proposed legislation has not rallied around it to give it any legs. So once again, Bernie Sanders is out there as the lone soldier. Bernie Sanders, looking at the 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 people that are showing up at his rallies, the party is not backing his play. So once again, they're going to cut the knees out from Bernie Sanders the way they did the previous two elections, because they won't back the play with substantive proposed legislation. And I know that it wouldn't pass if you offered it. But right now, that's not the point. What the point is is by offering the legislation, by starting the conversations, by initiating the dialogue, you start to explain to the American people what you really stand for. But by staying silent, you're demonstrating what you really stand for. And what you stand for ain't hitting on nothing. So with all of that, that's what I got for the day. And with that, I will thank you all for joining me today. Will Hug in that beautiful blue shirt with that tie. That was spot on. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you all for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. New show tomorrow. KJ No is my guest. You all got to tune in because that brother is flat out brilliant. Also, please follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show. You know, I'm doing this for you, but I can't do it without you. Follow us on social media. All the links are below in the show description. And you can go back and you can watch previous episodes of the show. There's a whole lot of really, really good stuff out there, a whole lot of good stuff in there. All you got to do is unpack it. And please click on the like. Whatever social platform you're watching this on, I need you to go to YouTube and subscribe to the show on YouTube. And remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. Why? Because it's rhetoric-free podcasting. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day. Peace and blessings. Have a great one. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.